Good evening and welcome to a new edition of To The Point. This evening we'll be tackling two major issues: the Egyptian presidential elections, in the aftermath of the elections, what is in store. Also we'll be delving on the issue of the crisis in Palestine and U.S. policy vis-a-vis this issue and this region will be under discussion this evening with a distinguished panel. With us in the studio is His Excellency Ambassador Hamdi Saleh, former Assistant Foreign Minister. A pleasure to have you with us.
Delighted.
With us also this evening is Dr Cherif Amir, Professor of Geopolitics at the University of Paris. A pleasure to have you with us. The elections, it wrapped up with 97% of the votes went to President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, reinstating him a second term in office. What's worth noting is the number of attendees, people that went out and actually cast their votes. Almost 25 billion, 24,700 and something, 25 billion participated, which I believe constitutes 45 or so % of those eligible to vote, which are 59 million. How do you see this figure, Your Excellency?
Well, the Egyptian people in general are anxious for stability and for security and for progress.
Yes.
And they are trying to find ways to do that. So that's one way of expressing their interest, that we would like the country to be stable, to be secure, and to move on. Of course, the choice was a little bit, not as wide as the people thought in the past. But also, it was clear that the preference was going to Fattah al-Sisi. His accomplishment during the 4 years and his personality and the way how the country moved from insecurity to security, from situation of instability to stability, all this projected a certain personality and a certain popularity for him, which I think it was already, guaranteed that he will win.
Yes.
The point, as you said, it is not only the fact that he won with this rate, which is 97%, but the point is that the people went out of their way to go to the voting places and to really vote. And 3 days, and an expression of the support was not only in terms of voting, but in terms of groups who are really moving in front of the building, in front of the building of the voting centers, and expressing their own views, and really, making, more or less demonstrating their own commitment to proceed with the same track which Fattah al-Sisi has started.
Dr. Cherif.
Well, at the beginning, I would like to salute, first of all, the Egyptian people for their perfect work that they have done all over and outside Egypt and inside Egypt. Although terrorism tried to intimidate us the day before in Alexandria, but we still, women especially, didn't have any fear, and it was a slap on the face of all the terrorists that even the Egyptian women were that courageous of going there.
They were courageous the first time as well.
Of course.
Most of the voters happened to be from the women. So.
Being biased.
But when we have 24 hours between terrorist attack,
yes.
The timing was very clear to dissuade all of us to stay at home. But the polling stations were full of patriot Egyptians outside, I repeat, outside and inside Egypt. There is someone we should also salute in all that is the opponent, Mr. Musa, who respected all the transparency and even President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi saluted him. He showed that Egypt is living in a new era of democracy. He respected the results. He respected all the rules all that time. So this is the kind of message that we're giving to the world, that we have normal political process as every other country in respect of the laws and in respect also in our duty to fight terrorism. Lots of people were gambling about that there will be low turnout. Well,
they were actually it was the media, especially the Western media. It was the Western media that was creating this vibe that the voter turnout would be low.
And what is amazing is that the answer is not from the authorities; it was from the people themselves. Well, in the media, the picture tells all. When you have the queues outside and for the expats and inside, that means that the people are giving the message clearly to the mainstream media outside. There is another point. All the non-governmental organizations who were welcomed to come to Egypt, they came here and they didn't suffer from any harassment at all. They went all over the governorates in Egypt, even in Munafaya. They were there. We saw the pictures. American delegation was very, very highly received. So I think that even the non-governmental organizations outside of Egypt, I think they will have excellent reports about what was going on. So maybe we are underestimating our forces at some times, but I think that outside, when you read all the mainstream media since the declaration of the results, no, there is no really any mocking or any attack against Egypt, because they know that it was the people who said their word, and they cannot debate about that.
Yes. The lines outside our embassies, and here I'm talking to you as the ambassador, you were abroad, the lines queuing outside the embassy with Egyptians standing there regardless of the weather. And in most of the European countries, it was not really very pleasant weather. It was quite cold. To actually go in and cast a vote, what message is being directed to the people of that country? I mean, is this not a strong lobbying tool, countering the messages and maybe the way the media, the Western media, was portraying and reporting about events in Egypt?
Let me say that, you know, the fact that the Egyptians abroad were very much interested in connecting with the Egyptian embassy and really going to the voting has actually two messages. Yes. One is a political interest. And the political interest was really a difficult thing to judge, because there was so much so much pressure on them from the Muslim Brothers, from other groups, particularly in the Gulf area and so on, yes, to try to derail the process and to tell them not to go. So the fact that you find large number in the Gulf, particularly in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf, going to vote, it's a political message that, you know, the message which was given to them by the Muslim Brothers and by the extremists was rejected. On the other hand, in the European and the American capitals, it's a little bit different game. The fact that the people will leave their own work and go to vote and, you know, devote at least one day is by itself a message that, you know, they are committed to the country. So that's a political message. But on the other side, there is a social message. There is a feeling among the Egyptians living abroad that they are not connected enough. They would like to be connected. And that's a message that we are coming because this is the only opportunity we have to try to make our point clear. And, you know, supporting the president, supporting Egypt and so on. But we expect from you as Egypt and as embassies and as Ministry for Egyptians living abroad and so on, to really work on another system, a mechanism to connect us. So these two messages has to be really taken care of in the future. And
what about a sense of belonging? Because one thing noticeable is that the number of people voting abroad has increased from the last time. Is this a sense of belonging? Is this a sense of we want to be part and parcel of the reform process? Is it that they feel that something is changing?
Let me say that, you know, our policy should focus on the idea that we should encourage Egyptians who are living in Europe and America to have a belonging to their own country where they are living there and to our country, to Egypt.
Yes.
So to combine both.
Yes.
And not to encourage them to be separate from the community.
You cannot be separate from the society you're living in.
In Europe and so on. Yes. They have to be part of the culture since they accepted and they wanted to be there.
Definitely.
But on the other hand, the people who are living in the Arab countries, this is very much connected because they are coming back anyway. And that's a different message, that's a different system. So I think the sense of belonging is always with Egyptians. But it's also like any other nation. People from all other nations, they belong to their own country. There is nothing really amazing about that. But the point how to make the best use of it, to really cultivate it, to try to channel it into positive attitudes towards your country and towards the country they are living in.
Can we see this energy that was developed abroad, that we'd see more Egyptians living abroad investing, for example, in Egypt? Because in the past, unfortunately, there was kind of a detachment. Can we capitalize that they'd come back with investment, come back with know-how? Can we see this developing in the future?
First of all, we know that from the beginning that one of the main sources of the Egyptian economy was the transfer of money from outside, and these people are helping their families.
But from the Gulf, not from Europe.
Sometimes it happens.
Most of it, yes, was from the Gulf, yes.
Most of it, yes. But let me tell you that, of course, these people, when they grew up in the West, I mean, lots of them are having an open-minded way of seeing economy. And maybe this is our role now. And I think that President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is very aware of this point, that we have to put aside bureaucracy in a way to facilitate these people to come and invest. Maybe we were forced to do that at a certain time because we went through very difficult times since 2011. But I think that we are aware now that in order to boost our economy, we have already lots of population outside of Egypt. They work and they have good status in a way or another. So we have to use this in a way. We have to make this communication with them by telling our embassies all over the world to encourage them that they could start some business here in a way or another. I think that our economy needs this now. We are all prepared for this. And I think that maybe in the coming years, maybe we'll see some projects made by Egyptians who were living abroad and came back to Egypt. It needs some work. It needs confidence. We have to give assurances that bureaucracy won't be an obstacle, that they won't regret it. There was many mistakes committed in the past, but I think that now we are starting all over again. We have a serious president who is very realistic. He knows the positive and the negative points in our country. And he doesn't have any problem telling us about it. So I think he made a very good strategy by contacting also the youth. Because young people outside of Egypt, I mean by Egyptians, they have this longing to their country. In a way or another, their culture. I know it from my living out there. Many people say, well, we didn't learn Arabic as we wanted to learn it. We want to come back to Egypt, visit the family. So I think that it is the opportunity to gather the youth. Every country is doing that by gathering its youth outside. And I think we could, this is our investment in our young people living abroad. They will be the best ambassadors for us in the future. And they will be the best people offering opportunities to those who are living here in Egypt.
Speaking to some of the international observers, the comments that we heard was what was unique about the Egyptian elections is the enthusiasm. They didn't expect women participation. Somehow there was an impression that females in Egypt were second-class citizens. One of the judges from Uganda, actually, she said that there was this image that women in Islamic countries are sort of underprivileged and repressed or oppressed, and somehow she was surprised at the participation of females and the fact that she saw female judges in some of the polling stations. Also, one of the things that was observed by one of the Greek observers was the political maturity of the Egyptian people, which also they found quite surprising. And that is probably maybe because of some of the reports that we heard. Your comment?
That's me?
Yes.
First, I'd like to comment on the first point you mentioned about the investment by Egyptians.
Yes, go ahead.
We should not expect Egyptians living abroad to invest. The role is not really to invest. The role is really to connect the institutions they are working on in there, major companies and major institutions, with the Egyptian institution. The role is to be a conduit where they can encourage. No, not lobby, even encourage their own institutions, look into the potential in this country, like any other country.
Okay.
And we can facilitate, since we know the country, we know the language and so on. So we have to encourage them to play that role and not to focus on investment, because basically there is no problem for investment. There is no problem for finding money. Once you find what you call feasible project, you will find very much an easy way to find access to funds from international institutions, from banks and so on. So it's not this focus on money is a mistake from our end. It's not really the money. It is the idea. It is the project. It's the ability to put things together. Yani, can you imagine that, we have companies who are, it was established in China 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Now they are really in the stock market in New York. Alibaba. I don't know whether you heard about this company or not. Alibaba, it's a Chinese company who's really to connect people together to try to buy from each other. And it started about 25 years ago.
It's an online thing.
Yeah, it was a laughing at the stock at that time. Now it is in the stock market in New York and everywhere, and people competing for it. So the issue is really to encourage Egyptians everywhere to look into what you call doable, feasible ideas and projects. That's number one. To come back to the point you are talking about the enthusiasm and so on. Well, it will be a mistake to really generalize about the Islamic world like what this Ugandan.
This is the image that seems that they're receiving.
I lived in Africa, and I know that that's not an image. Egypt is a different country. Egypt is a country who has 250 years of modernity, before any country in the region. It really has to be compared with Spain, with Italy, with Greece, with the Mediterranean. So the progress of the society has been accomplished for a long time, and that is expected to have the women participating. That's a regular practice. That is something that's part of the Egyptian culture for the last 50 or 60 years. Not even that for the last 100 years. So there's nothing new. The second point about the enthusiasm of the people, actually, I respected that. I appreciated that. The fact that the people were very much interested to participate and to move on and to be in front of the voting. But we need to really encourage that a little bit more in the future.
How can we encourage more youth participation? And should this not be in the scope of work of political parties? Because during those elections, really, political parties came under a lot of criticism for the lack of role, really, they played. Let's say within the past 4 years. Or is this too harsh as a criticism?
Well,
since you live here.
So you're talking about the youth here in Egypt?
We're talking about the youth in Egypt and the role of political parties.
Well, the political parties, my respect to all of them, but let me tell you frankly, as an Egyptian, what I think. They have a lot to learn about democracy now. I think that I didn't like the fact that some were calling for a boycott or trying to make the picture very bad about Egypt. I think that the political parties, they have to have their own programs and political plans for the youth. No promises in just telling promises to the people. They have to give concrete work, complete road plan, and then they will call the young people to their plans, because the young people are always prepared to get the notion of what they want to do in the future. If there is a political party telling them this is the future that I could offer, they could choose. So I think that this is the work of these political parties. The state has also a role, is to give them some space in the media to express that, but if it's constructive. I was giving the example of the conference that President Sisi had for 3 days, the story of a nation.
Yes. And
this was for more than 72 hours.
You were there?
No, I wasn't invited. I didn't go. What's really impressive is that we saw a president surrounded by all the spheres of the society, giving an account to the people. We never saw that since more than 40 years. Giving an account.
Only 40?
Maybe more.
No, I disagree. I disagree. Egypt has a tradition of this. In the last election, all the time there was a president always giving.
I think that President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi was extremely courageous by telling what he has done and what he couldn't do during these 4 years. He was very open to all the questions, and especially from the young people. He understands very well what's going on in the minds of the young people. I think that this cut the road for all the other parties to make any gambling about it, because he gave concrete elements. He spoke with numbers. He gave a notion to the people about how Egypt should be governed. And he was open to have the criticism also on direct and live questioning.
Very good, yes, I agree with you.
So I think that this is the step that you should do. The parties should have concrete elements. I heard some of them who are telling that before the elections that will be candidates and all. Tell me one person, one of them, and even the person who was in the army and had this problem with that. They had headlines. I didn't hear a single sentence that's giving a concrete solution to our problems. I didn't hear it. As a citizen, why should I go gambling again since 2011 that the people went to the streets and then we went through all this process and now we're trying to find a new way. So if I have a president giving me concrete elements and knows the dangerous aspects of our region also, I should trust him. If someone else has something else to say, we're welcome to hear it, but I didn't find it. So they have to have these notions of concrete elements by giving concrete solutions, having the problem and trying to find a solution for it. Headlines doesn't work anymore with us.
Yes. Your Excellency, your comment about the role of political parties before we shift to Israeli policies.
I'd like to shift to what's the future after the election. Political parties are weak. We know that, and there are so many reasons for this. Not necessarily only because of them, but because the system did not give them enough maneuvering possibilities to move.
Can they mature within the next 4 years?
Well, it depends how the system will interact with them. It's not really because the parties in general is like an organ who is really living in a climate. But let me come back to the point is, now after the election, we have a challenge. We have several challenges. One is domestic, which is the economic situation, and also building confidence among the people and so on that, you know, the system is going to move along with them or with their expectation. And another which is external, you know, the region is full of problems.
Yes.
And in both cases there is a common denominator, which is the terrorism and insecurity. So I think we need to really develop more or less a strategy on both cases. And I think what my colleague here talked about, that President Fattah Sisi offered his own reading of the picture in the conference, is very useful. And it's about time now that we build on this. We see how we can really put together a strategy, a scientific strategy, with regard to the economic development process. Because there is a debate in Egypt about how we move on this. Should we focus on major projects? Should we focus on really moving with the education and so on, other things? And then also how we deal with the regional policy, whether Egypt should really take a more active policy or should we really continue the same process. So all this needs to be examined carefully, and I think the stage is ready for that.
Israel, do we have a peace partner? Before we used to say there is a deadlock. Can we use the term deadlock to what's taking place on Palestinian territories now? Or have we reached a stage whereby diplomacy has failed?
The situation is very confusing. Now, after the decision of the Trump administration to consider Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, it became a very confusing situation because we have the U.S. strategy is still committed to what you call the deal of the century, and it's very vague, it's not really clear. At the same time, they say we are going to push for peace, and they wanted to have, you know, partnership between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And to a large extent, this is not clear, but at least their commitment to move towards peace is something which we should really look into it, not to dismiss it right away. On the other hand, we find that the Palestinians are really up in arms. You know, this is a situation which they really hated, and the Gaza march, which we saw now, has really created a real havoc in the entire Palestinian territory. And there is so many martyrs, there is so many victims, which is really amazing. I just was looking on the Guardian, which is a British newspaper, and there was an article by one of the columnists saying this is awakening ring to the world that, you know, you should really look into the plight of the Palestinians. So there is a real issue now. Now, you cannot really separate that from the picture of the entire region. The entire region is really in turmoil. And the Syrian issue is really up now in, you know, for discussion between the Turkish, the Iranian, and the Russian in Istanbul. And then the Americans are, you know, even waving the flag that they are going to withdraw from Syria. That will affect entirely the balance within Syria and even the balance in the region.
Yes.
All this is something which you have to take into consideration when we try to push towards a positive action from the world community with regard to the Palestinians.
Your view on how we are progressing on the Palestinian issue?
Well, of course, you remember in this show we had this discussion before about, especially about Gaza.
Yes.
And I think that the Gaza problem now is beginning to be an annoying problem for all the Middle East now. There has to be a unified front for the Palestinians before that there will be any action asked from the Western powers or even Russia. What we have seen 2 days ago, I think it was very dangerous, that there is a gambling by the leadership in Gaza of the people themselves, using them as strategy elements towards Israel. What's the use of pushing people knowing that Israel will answer by fire? Of course, now Israel said, we don't care about the international community and the investigations. And no one will ask any more about this question. So what about the people who were killed? Why the leadership in Gaza took such a decision? Although they have arms, and we in Egypt suffered a lot because of what they have done in the past. So I think that this issue is harming the Palestinians now. There has to be, and I won't say reconciliation, there has to be an immediate settling of this division within the Palestinians. I heard Khalid Mashal 2 days ago criticizing Egypt in a way or another. He was in Tehran or in Ankara, I think. They have to know that they have to take an action within themselves first to ask the international community to be aware of their problems. I think that the Americans and the Israelis, well, this is a suitable situation now. For the Israelis, Gaza is always an excuse, and it will remain like that forever, as long as there's no unified front. When the Palestinians had one leadership, when they had one negotiating team, they gained a lot.
What did they gain?
Well, the Oslo Peace Accords, at least, they were recognized, at least, in a way or another.
We have a lot of accords. The issue is what came out of them.
They have a PA, a Palestinian Authority, at least. But now the division is killing the Palestinian issue itself. And I'm asking several times, the Gaza leadership is working for whom? They're listening to Qatar or listening to Turkey or listening to Iran. I'm not telling that because I'm Egyptian, but they have to listen to Egypt. We are the big brother after all. And we know what we are the peace mediator in this process. And the Israelis know the weight of the Egyptian diplomacy and how we could make changes on the ground. So, but we cannot be helpful to the issue if the people concerning themselves didn't act to find a solution within themselves. So I think that the problem of Gaza has to be treated extremely rapidly now, because we are heading towards a disaster in this region because of this point. It's been used by Iran, it's been used by Turkey, it's been used by Qatar. And this is very harmful for the whole neighbors, for Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia. I think that it's time to find a solution for it.
Your Excellency, how do you read the perspective? Is the issue really a division of Hamas or Fatah?
It's definitely a part of it. The fact that the Palestinians are not unified and not really able to develop a perspective of what they can offer in terms of moving the peace process. But the issue is not only that now. I want to remind you that, about a couple of weeks ago, there was a possibility of a confrontation between Israel and Iran.
Yes.
And that is a major thing. between Israel and Hezbollah, and an invasion of Israeli to Lebanon. So there is tremendous threats really facing the Arab region. And to a large extent, what is really the parties who are deciding the fate of Syria and of Lebanon and so on are not Arabs. They are really the Russians, the Americans, the Turks, and the Iranians. This is really not an acceptable situation. And it's about
the
time.
role of Egypt and all that, because if you, as you were saying, you just raised a very important issue, and that is the fate is not being decided by the people of that country. What's the role of Egypt?
Well, that's the point, actually.
In that mess.
Actually, what happened that after the Arab Spring, there was a withdrawal of the major Arab countries from playing their own role. Egypt is the prime power. It withdrew because of the revolution and so on, and continues.
We were immersed in local issues.
Now we are re-emerging to play our role, and the shadow of Egypt is really now started to be really felt everywhere.
Yes.
But until now, we did not have a very aggressive policy, neither in the Syrian issue, nor in Lebanese, nor in the Libyan, and of course of the
When
Yemeni.
you say aggressive, can you elaborate? How aggressive can you be, taking into account that you have a battleground right around the corner trying to fight terrorism? I mean, we're one of the very few countries who's quite serious about the grave danger of terrorism, and we're out there fighting it. You have another battle, which is an economic battle. The whole region is in turmoil. Trying to get people to set up shop and do business in your own country with boiling points all around you definitely is not easy, because this is a danger zone. So? Your
question is that,
basically what's the step forward? What's the step forward?
Basically, the point which you are making, that because you have internal insecurity and problems within your own borders, so you should really focus on your own.
No, I'm not making a point. I'm just saying, no. You're saying that we have to be more aggressive.
I'm not saying, I'm saying the people are considering that, Egypt had a role in the past, and that role was withdrawn. And now we are re-emerging.
Yes.
In order to regain that role, you have to participate. Whether you call that aggressive or a positive or whatever attitude,
I'm not
it depends. It depends. But in the final analysis, the situation is now being, controlled by external, out of the region powers, and it's about time that the major powers, Egypt and Saudi Arabia, and the two other countries, the UAE and Bahrain, who are weaker, we consider them the concerts of the Arab countries.
Yes.
Now they can really develop a certain strategy, and I appreciate very much the efforts done by the Saudi Arabia and by Egypt together, especially after the visit of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and meeting with President Sisi, to develop